Space is overfilled with challenges, and by overcoming those, we prove that nothing is impossible. But where are we now? Let's welcome our keynote speaker, Mrs. Artemis Westenberg, the CEO of Explore Mars Europe, who will tell us about the future technologies, research, and projects of space agencies and private companies. Artemis, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Our future. It was a very long title for my talk, and I thought if we're talking technology, if we're talking innovation, if we're talking science by universities, by companies, R&D, we're actually talking about our future. So how do we envision our future? Yes, part of it is, of course, we envision our future here on Earth like this, green cities. And although this is just an artist's impression, I know for a fact that more and more cities in Europe, even in the Netherlands, are moving towards this. No, it doesn't look as wonderful as this yet, but we are trying to get there, to remove the view of cars as much as we can from the streets, to have them park underground, to have more green, to have also more green in our levels, not just on street level. Of course, that helps with climate change as well. We do know that, right? The more trees, the more shrubs we plant, the cooler a city will be. So, it's better for us humans also if we do it this way. Now, if we think about, what will we look like, our houses on Mars, then there are some architects that have a very long view. They look far in the future. This is a design to picture a city on Mars with 1 million inhabitants, and all these little windows you see. These are actually windows, and you also see they shield the people from cosmic radiation by overlaps. The windows are underneath, because it's important that we, stay healthy, of course. And lots of what you see here is underground as well. There's a very large complex thought up with solar panels. There is, food being grown. So this is what some architects, and these are real architects that make, big city projects here on our Earth as well, envision if they're thinking about, humanity living on Mars. Now, of course, there's also the discussion, should robots do the exploration or humans? As if there is a dichotomy. There isn't. If we go to Mars, if we go to the moon, right now at the ISS, we have both. Because we would be really silly, we humans, if we didn't use robots to help us, to assist us, to make sure that those tasks that are either too repetitive or too dangerous to humans, that you use robots for that. And of course, NASA, but also the European Space Agency, does fund research like that, not just their own research, not just, facilities in Europe from the European Space Agency or in America from NASA, but also they fund research, that looks promising from companies. And I'll show a few. Now, why do I show you the UN image here? Well, there's a very simple reason. If we're talking about the future, who is actually designing our future? Is that me? Is that you? Who is doing it? And as it is right now, most of the designing of our society, which means also our future, not just on Earth, but also in space, is done by males. There's nothing wrong with being a man. There's nothing wrong with being a male developer. The only thing is you have been brought up, socialized in a certain way because you are a male, like I have been brought up, socialized in a certain way because I'm a female. Like I said, there's nothing wrong with that. The thing is, though, we have two genders and they're not the same. If any female knows about their smartphone, trying to push something on the smartphone, on the surface, on your tablet, and it's not reacting the way you are expecting it, you have to tap several times, harder and harder, and you wonder, why isn't it doing what it's supposed to do? That's because there's Samsung, and I'm not dissing Samsung. I'm just saying, big company developing this. They didn't develop it as for female fingers. And human nature developed us, humans, female humans, with different tactile function of our fingertips. So we have a feeling that we're actually pushing right through the screen. We're not. But for our fingertips, it feels like that. So, and you know, there are other examples, like if you're in a car, you have this headrest to, you know, to prevent you from breaking your neck. That's great if you're a male. None of the headrests in any car on this moment on planet Earth will protect a female. They simply won't, because car manufacturers apparently can't still be bothered by half of their customers. Now, like I said, I showed the UN logo because I'm not just CEO of Explore Mars and also the former president and founder of Explore Mars in America. I'm also the president of the Dutch Society for Women's Rights, Female Labour and Equal Citizenship that was founded in 1894 by a very famous woman, Aletta Jacobs. I am in her footsteps many, many years later. And I very often am part of this Commission on the Status of Women. It's one of the NGOs. My organization has consultative status with the ECOSOC. And so we can actually go there, and it happens to be, as you can read, that next year's theme on, you know, how to make life more equal for everyone on Earth is about innovation and technology change, and how the education in the digital age should aim for gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls. And at the moment, even in a very highly internet-savvy country like the Netherlands, where I'm from, women, there is a gender gap in how we use it, how it's, you know, developed and for consumers to start with, whether it, you know, it helps us women, and you know, and are we educated enough to use it? Also, because let's face it, in the Netherlands, over 65 are more females than males. It happens to be that if you survive childbearing as a female, and that has been done for millions of years, you actually, if you survive that, you very often will end up being older than males by the time your end of life arrives. And that means that you know, we have a lot of elder women, and not all of them, of course, were raised with computers. Because let's face it, 27 years ago, is it, Mike? No, less, 20 years ago, I think. No, a bit more, 27 indeed. You know, we started with the internet, and before that it didn't exist. So if you're now 93, you were already, you know, a pensioner by the time internet arrived, and you might not have, you know, been part of it. So this whole talk, I'm supposed to tell you about all these wonderful innovations, but what I want to tell you is that, yes, they're there, and they gave us, all of us, male, female, many opportunities. Just remember what we've gained in the last 27 years. But it also gives us problems, and it sometimes widens the gap between males and females. And we don't want that, not on Earth, but especially not when we, you know, venture out to the Moon and Mars. And also, you know, like I said, if you look at our planet, we talk about our planet and we talk about the poor South. Yeah, that has to do with how we project the continents on our maps. If we do it like this, it's the poor North, right? And so it's just, you know, a way of thinking, and you have to think outside the box. So if you think about our planet from now on, remember that you can flip the map of this planet, and then you have to perhaps think differently about, you know, what it is. And also, if you flip the map, you notice that Canada is a lot bigger than the United States, really a lot bigger, and Africa is actually bigger than the United States and Australia combined. So it's, you know, perspective makes a difference. Now, talking about access to internet, then this whole idea that we should have Starlink or OneWeb and everyone should be able to link to internet regardless where you live, because it's part of who we are. It's part of businesses, small and big. And it doesn't matter whether you're, in Australia, in northern Canada, or, somewhere in South America or in Africa. You need the internet nowadays to function, even as small business. So it's very much necessary that it is available, and it's available to a cost-effective price, because otherwise, we have a problem. Personally, I feel that our planet is rich enough, wealthy enough in resources that we actually could feed everyone equally. We could house everyone. We could educate everyone. We could give everyone healthcare. But in all these rights, all these things I consider as human rights, actually access to internet also features. Because if not, you are truly left behind. Now, OneWeb, Starlink, all great and fine. This is the view of the Arecibo dish, looking into space, and all these striking lines are Starlink satellites going by while you're doing a viewing. You do understand that astronomers aren't too keen on all these little satellites. And I've known that, they try to not make them be so reflective, which would help, but it's still kind of a problem. Then safeguarding Earth. We have put so much around our planet in the last 50 years that what you're seeing here is a satellite coming apart, breaking into all little bits and pieces. By the fact that these satellites travel through space at a very high velocity, all these little pieces, even if they wouldn't be bigger than a Eurocent, would be dangerous. Dangerous to other satellites, dangerous to the International Space Station, dangerous to rockets that are launching from Earth going into space. So we need to do something about this. Debris and how to get it out, what is already there, the new rules and regulations. If you bring a new satellite into orbit, if it's more than, really low Earth orbit, you actually have to have a plan and a whole system that you can deorbit it. And that's, of course, a good start. But there's already so much junk in space that we need to do something about it. And the European Space Agency, NASA, but also companies are trying to think how to remedy this. And I am sure we will be able in the end to remedy it, but it's not as easy because space is three-dimensional. It's not the same as hoovering your carpet. So it's a problem. Then, of course, we have all these wonderful satellites. And I'm not, ironically speaking here, I'm not dissing them at all. These satellites help us. They help the farmer, the fisherman, to know, what plants need more water or less water, where the fish are. It monitors our climate. It monitors many things. It monitors, where pirates are at the sea. So it's empowering. And what's also empowering is that there are quite a number of satellites that if you have the data from that actually cost you nothing. If someone, adapts and develops an app from it, then you have to pay for the app. But the data is free. It's one of the things that I really like as a European. Like most people, I don't like paying taxes. I would like to hoard my money. But if I'm paying taxes and they are building, this Sentinel, these big Copernicus satellites from my taxes that are then available for everyone on Earth, I'm actually fine with that. That's one of the expenses that I go like, yeah, even if it would be a voluntary, donation, I would actually donate to that. Now, safeguarding Earth is, of course, also about solar flares. This is an image from the Soho while a solar flare was developing. Because solar flares, disrupt our electricity, disrupt our internet. And our society has become so much dependent on both that we need to know when it's happening so we can, safeguard our stuff around Earth, the satellites if possible, safeguard certainly the ground stations, the electricity power stations. So these are things we have to think about if we are building for the future. We have to safeguard what is already there. And of course, there is this tiny problem that sometimes you get these earth shearers, these big asteroid rocks that could destroy, I don't know, New York, Sydney, Warsaw, if they would come down and perhaps even a bigger chunk of Earth, make it quite uninhabitable. So, we need to do something about that. And of course, NASA is. European Space Agency is, we are trying, but space is really, really fast. And again, it's three-dimensional, and these things travel fast as well. So it's not that easy, and without the right resources, we're actually no better off than the dinosaurs. Now, safeguarding Earth is also recycling. And recycling means also reusing. Just think of it. I flew from Amsterdam to Krakow in a plane. Just think of it if that plane had to be thrown away, rebuilt completely before I could fly back. And for a long, long time, we've been doing that in space, and partly we're still doing it because recycling, reusing is not as easy as it sounds, but it is apparently doable. And more companies, especially the commercial companies, are going that route. And it makes, like I said, complete sense. So it's also a way of safeguarding Earth, of safeguarding what we have and not squandering. Nice, same system as once the Apollo, big parachutes, and they splash down and then they're picked up. Now, of course, we have a future. The Artemis future, the Orion, to the moon and Mars, because let's not forget the Artemis missions are about putting humans on Mars. The moon is a way station. The whole project is still aimed at Mars. It's just that, the moon is 3 days away by a rocket flight, and Mars is at least 6 months away. So, it's a bit easier. Also, if I would want to have a rover on the moon, I could actually, move it with a joystick. On Mars, no way. I mean, the moon is 1.25 second latency. On Mars, it's 3 minutes and 12 seconds to 22 minutes and 3 seconds. So you do understand that, moving a rover on Mars, no joystick, so you have to think of other ways. And we are. Again, the great thing about this mission, this is not an all-American party like the Apollo missions. These missions will already, I think there are already 21 countries that have signed the Artemis Accord. They will work together. So when we are there, it's not just when we go back to the moon, there will be a female there. Hey, hooray. It's one of the things that I can always surprise kids in elementary school with. The moment I ask, how many people walked on the moon? You'll get numbers like 3 to 50 to 200. And then you ask, how many females? And I can tell you that the generation of elementary school cannot imagine that there weren't at least 25% females among those 12. The whole idea, the whole concept that only males walked on the moon was like, what? Really? Well, thankfully, NASA is funded by American taxpayers' money. Thankfully, that makes it impossible to have no females on a flight because you can't use taxpayers' money and, do gender discrimination like that. So we are completely safe. In that sense, there will be males and females. And remember, 25% of the astronauts that we have had or are active right now are females. As I always say, if I look at this, as Artemis, I do approve of this message, as a politician would say. But like I said, I see it like this. Earth, Moon, Mars. And it's not just I see it like this. This is actually the way it's designed. Now, if we go to Mars, well, we step on Mars. Because let's face it, I was very privileged to be part of these 45 people that were allowed to present their first step on Mars position. If you go all the way down here, I chose Copernicus crater. Not because I wanted to, make you happy, you Polish people. I mean, you could think that. No, the reason is Copernicus, as a person and as a scientist, was most certainly a giant on whose shoulders we're still standing. The fact that he proved that Earth was not the center of the universe, which meant also that humans were not the center of creation, was such a shake-up of the way society and humans saw themselves that it it constituted a renaissance of science. It changed the way we looked at ourselves. It changed the way we thought of ourselves. And I thought if we go to Mars, we should go to a place where, 500 years from now, kids in elementary school will learn, where did they step on Mars? And I wanted it to be a place that then humans could think, oh, that makes sense. That, the name of that place. As it happened to be, like I said, I'm not a geologist, so I wrote an abstract, sent it in, and again, I was asked to present it. And as it happened to be, the day I was sent the message that I could present my abstract, there was also a NASA advisory about, literally they said, there's something on Mars. This was on a Friday when I heard it. On Monday at 12, we will tell the world that Mars is quite different than we've always thought. And in that advisory, Copernicus crater was named. So a colleague of mine, I happened to be in Washington to go and talk to Congress about NASA budget and things on that Monday. And he said, why did you pick it? Why did you pick it? How did you know there was something important there? And I said to him, you're a religious man, right? Yeah? I said, well, because I actually picked it because of the name, there's another reason. The Copernicus crater is at a situation on Mars where there is still a remnant of the magnetosphere that used to be, Mars, and that means that you are protected against cosmic radiation. Now, regrettably, it's only about 20% protection, still better than nothing. That was one of the reasons. The other is the name. Like I said, I want, future generations to think, oh yeah, those guys and girls in the 21st century knew what they were doing. Regrettably, it won't be there because, it's too far south. If you look at it, it's nearly 50 degrees south and 180 degrees east. This part of Mars is where the remnants of the magnetosphere were found by the Mars Global Surveyor when it was aerobraking over Mars, dipping too far into the atmosphere while their sensors were recording. And so the fact that we know there is a magnetosphere still there is happenstance. Serendipity. It wasn't, planned that way, but we know. Like I said, it's too far south. They have decided that probably it shouldn't be further south than like 15 or 50 north, because, Mars is cold and our machines have a bit of a problem with cold. And actually, that's one of the problems why going to the moon is not as easy as we think. If we want to harvest water on the moon, we need to learn to build machines with materials that can withstand 40 degrees Kelvin. I can tell you there are no metals that are not completely brittle by that temperature. So squeezing water from moon rocks is not as easy as it sounds. By the way, it's probably not easy at all because we're not doing it here on Earth either. Now, how did it all start? Well, these are, for those in the know, Valentina Tereshkova, the first female into space, and yes, Yuri Gagarin sipping, I think that's a cocktail or something, I don't know, Irish coffee. And so this is how it started, male and female, the Russians. If we think scientists, most of us don't have this first image in our heads. And of course, it's mixed nowadays. Any country you come in, it's females and males. Also, if you look up the word, if you say, what is connected to the word woman in Google, you get a lot of, jobs, but none of them are like, CEO of a major multinational. It's midwife, school teacher, all the more traditional, supportive roles, really. If you do man, well, you get a lot of adjectives that are more assertive. So that's apparently, because this is just a computer algorithm, it's just, harvesting what it finds on the internet, which means that apparently we as a human race still look differently at males and females. And like I said, it's not everywhere, and it is changing. And sometimes it's changing back to where we don't want to go, but it's there. So the human factor, females, is important, like males. If you think about space, it needs automation, it needs voice control commands, it needs domotica, so things that go because there's a certain temperature, and it, automatically, it needs robot helpers, and it needs monitoring in real time. That's all, internet, automation, apps. If I'm ill somewhere very far away from a hospital, then this would be great. A robot and a real doctor that I can interact with because I see her or his face, in this case his face, and this person can then try to ascertain what's wrong with me. And then of course we have artificial intelligence. Now this is a picture of my first Echo, as I've been a customer of Amazon since 1995, since they started. I actually, although I don't live in America, I was allowed to buy one when they were still completely beta in 2014. And if I may say that in those first few years, these things were, a nice novelty. They weren't very helpful, they weren't very useful. I can even tell you that at a certain point in time, Amazon asked me to have a conversation with Alexa, and they would monitor it and tape it. It felt like having a conversation with Commander Data of Star Trek. Because it was really, this machine was too literal, of course. I had to, normal, because I was supposed to have a normal conversation. Amazon explicitly instructed me not to, to talk robot talk, to talk as if I am talking to one of you. Yeah, that didn't really work out. I mean, after about 15 minutes, I was completely drained because it was so hard to make this machine learn what I was saying. But that's a few years ago. That was 2017 or 18, and we're now 2022. And I can tell you that I always interact very politely with my robots. You never know if they take over, well, and I'm kind of safe. So I always, I ask Alexa, what's the weather? And she'll give me the weather. And she might ask, do you want to know the weather tomorrow? And then I say yes, and she gives it. And then I thank her, thank you. And she'll say something like, oh, that's my job, or you're very welcome. But last week I had a very strange experience that she said, thank you for always thanking me. So like I said, if the robots take over, I think I'm safe. And I would recommend that you all be polite to your robots too. No, I do that because if I don't do that, you start saying like, give me tea to my daughters without thanking them. I would become a very antisocial person because of interacting with my machines. And I think we should not do that. I think the human interaction should be leading. And if that means that for some people I'm really silly thanking my robot, then that's fine with me. If this is my future, then let's be polite. Now, I was just saying, showing these ladies in space, and they were supposed to do spacewalks. And the problem with spacewalks, did any one of you learn from this spacewalk of 2 ladies that didn't go through? And did you know why? It's also the European Space Agency's astronaut, Samantha Cristoforetti, the first time she was at the ISS, she was supposed to do a spacewalk and it didn't go through. Why? They didn't have a suit. They don't have a suit for women, period. Right now, none. It doesn't exist. And you might have noticed that female and males don't actually look exactly the same physically. So that's kind of a problem. And so they didn't have the right sizes. They didn't have 2 small sizes at the same time at the ISS. That's why the spacewalk didn't go through. And with Samantha Cristoforetti, they had a spacesuit especially sent up for her, but that was an ATV that exploded on the launch pad. So it never reached her. So her first mission was without a spacewalk because of that reason. It had nothing to do with, discriminating a European at the ISS or discriminating a female. It just had to do with practicality. But that practicality is the life of female astronauts. The gloves are far too big, which means that it becomes nearly impossible to grab something and to really hold on to it, etc. Just remember, if you were a kid and you would be walking around in your father's boots, it would be really hard. Same here. So, NASA is giving money to this organization to build suits like this, and this actually is a far in the future idea that, I stand here and the computer scans me and then, gets me a suit that's really fitted to my body. Feels a bit like Back to the Future, one of the second one, I think, where his, his jacket sleeves adjust to exactly what he needs. But, we need to go there. We need most certainly to send suits that fit. Now, of course, the other problem is solar radiation, but mostly cosmic radiation. And this is an idea to if people are traveling through space in that capsule, they will be, safeguarded against these cosmic radiation by all these strange flaps they have. While it's turning in space, it will protect them. That's the idea. Now, of course, also robots. I told you, if we go, we do take them with us. They will help us. They will do things that we would never, ever think of risking a human life on. And so we have this little rover that's being funded by NASA at the moment. It's a small private company. And that robot is, the way it works, it can, like a gecko, climb up to mountains, climb into caves, so you don't have to risk an astronaut doing that. Robots. Now the thing, of course, if we think robots, there is always this problem that we might lose our jobs because the robots are doing it. The automation does it. So, is robot a helper or is it taking our jobs? That's a toss-up. The future will learn, will teach us what will happen, we will learn. But right now, nobody really knows. Now, I'm Dutch. We grow food for the world on a very tiny part. Well, look at the Netherlands to begin with. It's not really very big on Earth. And then, where we grow food is even a much smaller part. And that area is quite near where I live. If I take my bicycle ride 10, 15, 20 minutes, I will come to facilities like this, where we grow our food in stacks, where the machines, the computers change the position of the stacks, change the lighting, because we also do this. This, by the way, is in the Netherlands. This is an artist's impression of doing it on Earth. This is how we do it. We also, pump in extra CO2 to promote plant growth because, we need to do something with the CO2 anyway. So this is a good idea. And this is growing food in space on the International Space Station. Again, as you can see, using LED lights that have a certain color because they promote growth. Now, if we go to the moon, we have these grand plans with these big machines. And let's not laugh about the future because this might truly happen. They're building it. And yeah, it won't be easy and not the first time it might happen and be successful, but neither was the first Apollo mission. So, it's something that you have to learn. There's only one thing I want you all to know while you're looking at SpaceX and like this. This is the woman who gets us to the moon and Mars. There's not a man leading that company. This is the woman. She herself, Gwynne Shotwell, says, I know her well. She says she's employee number 7 that was hired. She has been leading SpaceX from the very start. She is the COO. She is the president of SpaceX. So yeah, sure, all of you, if you say SpaceX, everyone thinks Elon Musk, right? Well, he might have the money, and he certainly has the wherewithal to hire the right people, which is a good thing to have. I'm an Alexander historian. I can tell you Alexander the Great was great because he had the exact same thing. He knew whom to hire for the jobs he had, and that's why he was so successful. Because there's no way that a commander or a CEO or a owner can be everywhere. You need to know how to hire the right people. So if we think about our future, then know that already the future for a very large part is shaped by female, even if you sometimes don't realize it. And so that if we build for the future, whether it's machines, whether it's software, whether it's apps, we need to remember that the power of humanity is all of us. It's males and females. And if we do that, if we tap into that, I actually am very confident that we will combat climate change, that we will solve our CO2 problem. We will, make a better society for all of us. We will give all children a future. It is possible. And I think by now, we might have reached the level of civilization as humanity that we will be doing it. Because I want us, all of us, to have a future where everyone counts. Skin color, gender, age, birthplace, wealth are irrelevant. Only your contribution counts. And I would say, let's make it so.